So after the Miami Heat traded Kyle Anderson and Kevin Love for Norman Powell, the only size that we really have coming off the bench is like Nikola Jovic, and that's literally it. Unless low-key, they probably could play some Kashad Johnson at center.
Don't ever say something that's stupid again, boy.
Kidding, man.
Crazy.
Listen, I love Kashad Johnson. That's no secret. But he's not a center. I'm talking to you, Eric Spoelstra. He's not a center because I know you're going to try to make him one. But anyways, the Heat could get a real backup center through the trade market, as I don't think any of us expect the Heat to be done making moves. So in today's video, we're going to look at a few options of what the Heat can do in the trade market. I cooked up some trades of my own, but first I want to start with my boy Nick Roloff, because he put together some pretty interesting ones on his channel, Heat Report by Chat Sports. Make sure y'all check him out and subscribe, because he puts out great Miami Heat content every single day. Make sure to comment why if you're subscribed, and N if you don't get this reference.
Well, there are a couple deals that I took a long time to look at. One of them is this one.
All right, Nick, I'm taking over now. And in your first trade, you had the Miami Heat receiving Nikola Vucevic, a guy who I was going to say was a random scrub Heat killer Hall of Famer, but he really was never a scrub. He's a former multiple-time All-Star. It's just that Heat fans know that if he played the Heat every night, he'd be a real Hall of Famer. But anyways, Nick has him coming to Miami, while the Heat send over Terry Rozier and a second-round pick to the Chicago Bulls. My first reaction when I saw this trade was, ain't no way that's all that Vucevic's trade value is right now. But if you think about it, he's an expiring contract, so he could walk at the end of the season. And he's actually going to be 35 at the start of next year, which time flies. It feels like he was just grabbing 30 rebounds on the Magic yesterday. But he's already 35 years old. And for those reasons, he's a guy whose trade value won't actually be super high. Plus, the Bulls have a history of holding on to players for way too long. If you look at everybody they traded since 2024, they let go of Zach LaVine, DeMar, Caruso, and Lonzo Ball, and they have one first-round pick to show for it, and it was their own. And then they only have 2 second-round picks. The only real player of significance that they got was Josh Giddey, and I don't even know how much they like him because he's still a restricted free agent. So the Bulls hold on to their players for way too long, and I think Vucevic's value is not actually as high as I initially thought. His value was probably actually lower 2 years ago, where he shot 29% from 3, but this past season, he bounced back really well, shot 40% from 3 on 4 attempts, and he's been a consistent 18-point, 10-rebound per game guy for the last several years now. So he's still a very productive player and someone that the Heat could definitely use. I would personally prefer a more bruising, defensive big man off the bench, maybe someone like Dame Danger, the way that boy's been hooping. But while Vucevic isn't and never really was a defensive big, he can still rebound at a very high level, which is one of the Heat's biggest flaws. Also, Vucevic makes about $5 million less than Terry, so he would help the Heat go back under the luxury tax, and he's also an expiring contract, so the Miami Heat would be able to maintain that cap flexibility for next offseason. So I love this trade from Miami. For the Bulls, they are getting an expiring deal back in Terry Rozier in addition to a second-round pick, so I don't think that's bad value for a 35-year-old Vucevic who's also on an expiring deal. If the Heat can't pry away Vuce from the Bulls, they do have some other backup bigs that I like Zach Collins or Jalen Smith. Both of those guys are former first-round picks, former lottery picks, actually. They just didn't quite live up to that lottery label, but they're still young enough, relatively productive players that I think that he could get something out of one of those two guys. So they'd be a couple names to watch out for Miami as well. But in Nick's next trade, he has the Miami Heat receiving Robert Williams and Matisse Thybulle while sending Terry Rozier to the Portland Trailblazers. Both of those guys are expiring contracts, so once again, Miami would keep their cap flexibility for next offseason. Somehow, Matisse Thybulle is already 28 years old. I didn't realize he was a 4-year college guy, but he's always been an elite defender with a crazy wingspan. That's why he was taken in the first round. He was just never really able to develop any sort of offensive game. Although last season, he did shoot 44% from 3 on 3 attempts, but that was only in 15 games. So he really wasn't a part of Portland's rotation. Probably wouldn't play for the Heat either. Although he's definitely a Heat culture guy in terms of his defense, he just won't be playing over Hayward Highsmith or Pelle Larsson. I did love his vlogs though. I don't know if y'all remember when he was vlogging back in the bubble in Disney. Those were pretty cool, so I've been a fan of him as a person since then. He just probably wouldn't play much here. Now, Robert Williams, he'll also be 28 at the start of next season. We remember him from his pretty productive days with the Boston Celtics. Used to play pretty good against the Miami Heat, even did a nice job guarding Jimmy Butler at times. And he is, or at least he was, that defensive big that I would want the Heat to add. But he has major injury problems. Only played 61 games in the last 3 seasons combined. But he's a better fit than Terry Rozier. So for Miami, if you can flip Terry and get him in a no-risk deal, it's something that I would definitely do. And the only reason I could see Portland doing this is because they'd be able to open up a roster spot. I don't think they particularly want Terry Rozier. They already got Drew Holiday. They got Scoot Henderson. They don't really need Robert Williams now because they have a lot invested in their young centers like Klingon and Yang Hansen. But I guess either way, this whole trade is irrelevant because it means the Heat would have to deal with Joe Cronin, which they're definitely not going to do. He is an ugly, bald-headed hoe who don't know shit. Make sure y'all check out my Joe Cronin diss track, by the way. It's pinned on my Twitter at AnthonyD_Heat. In Nick's final trade, he has the Miami Heat simply flipping Terry Rozier for Jusuf Nurkic, who is now on the Utah Jazz after the Colin Sexton trade. This makes this kind of tough also because now the Heat would have to deal with Danny Ainge. And I don't know who Pat Riley would rather talk to, Joe Cronin or Danny Ainge. Although I guess he technically just did a deal with the Jazz, right? Because John Collins went to the Clippers in the Norman Powell trade, but we don't know if Ainge and Pat had direct contact there. I'd be very curious to see. But anyways, Nurkic is also expiring. He's a better fit than Terry Rozier, and he is big. 7 feet tall, 290 pounds. Never really was a great defender, but he could score a little bit, rebound a little bit, he could pass a little bit. I think he could play a few spot minutes off the bench for Miami, and I just think we need someone who is big for the sake of being big, someone that could clog up some space, and that's something that Nurkic will be able to do for probably a few years. He's only 30 years old, so he's not like he's that old anyways. And he also does make $7 million less than Terry Rozier, so the Heat can avoid the luxury tax again. And for Utah, I suppose that they would want to do this trade because Terry Rozier can be a great mentor for Isaiah Collier and Keontae George. And no, obviously, I'm kidding. You don't want Terry Rozier to mentor anybody. So I don't think there's any reason that the Jazz would do this trade, especially when you consider that they just traded Colin Sexton and a second-round pick for Nurkic. Why would they attach a second-round pick to Sexton when I think he's the better player? I don't know. That trade makes no sense to me. Maybe they just love Nurkic, but either way, I can't see the Jazz doing this trade. Although if I was Miami, sure, why not? Now I want to get into my first trade idea, in which I have the Miami Heat receiving Corey Kispert and Rashawn Holmes. In return, they'll be sending the Washington Wizards Terry Rozier. Essentially, what the Heat are doing here is they're trading one player who wouldn't play for 2 players who could. Kispert had a bit of a down year last year, only shot 36%, but he is a shooter, so I have no doubt that he'll bounce back, and he is a random scrub Heat killer Hall of Famer. He's had some crazy performances versus the Heat, so he's definitely someone that could provide some spacing. And then Rashawn Holmes is a guy who's been a very serviceable backup center for 10 years now. Decent lob threat, decent defender, could rebound a little bit, so I think he could play backup center here pretty well. And this would give the Heat just really 15 players deep. Like, their depth chart could be, obviously it could vary. Guys could play different positions. I don't know who would start, but let's just say at point guard, you got Davion and Kasparis. Then at shooting guard, Hero and Norman Powell and Pelle Larsson. At the 3, Wiggins, Kispert, Fontecchio. At the 4, Bam, Jovic, and Hayward. At the 5, Ware and Rashawn. I mean, that's 13 deep right there. I didn't even count Jaime and Kashad Johnson. I think both those guys still have some potential as well. So you could be 15 deep of legitimate NBA players, but also be extremely well-rounded. You have 2 to 3 players at every position that could play on any given night. And for a Heat team that has had injury problems for the last several years, having the more depth, the better. I think it could be very beneficial to them. And yeah, this is the one trade where the Heat aren't getting all expiring contracts back. Rashawn Holmes is expiring, but Corey Kispert makes $13 million for the next 4 seasons. But you'll still need shooting, When the Heat traded Duncan Robinson, they had Tyler Hero and nothing else. And now they have Norman Powell, yes, but Norman Powell's also expiring. So if he walks, yes, you're going to have cap space, but you're going to need to provide, to have shooting or provide shooting for whatever other star that you hopefully spend your money on next offseason. And adding an extra $13 million to your cap sheet next year, that's not the end of the world. Especially if the Heat are able to offload Andrew Wiggins $30 million. The Heat will have so much cap space next year that adding in a $13 million Corey Kispert is not that bad. I actually think it's good value, and it'll give them some of the shooting that they desperately need. For the Washington Wizards, you'd free up some cap space because now you're getting off Kispert's contract, and they would open up another roster spot. So I could see the Wizards potentially doing something like this as well. And then my final idea for a trade that I have is a 3-team one. This one took some time to cook up because I have the Miami Heat receiving Goga Bitadze and Jet Howard from the Orlando Magic. The Magic are getting Malik Monk and Keon Ellis from the Kings. And then the Kings are receiving Terry Rozier, Anthony Black, and a first-round pick from the Magic. From the Heat side of things, I think Goga Bitadze would be a perfect backup center. One, he's young, only 25 years old, fits the timeline pretty well. And last year, when he got to play for the Magic, he was awesome. Didn't get to play a ton because they got a lot of front court depth. But when he did play, guys were hurt. He balled out. He's a super high energy big, great rebounder. I think he's a Heat culture type guy and someone that could play a really nice role as a backup over here. Then you are getting Jet Howard. Former lottery pick, never really panned out, but he's only played a couple years in the league, so he's still pretty young. In college, he came out of Michigan as a shooter, so maybe he can be the Heat's next young shooter in the pipeline since they don't have one right now. And then also, they probably have a relationship with him just because he's Juwan Howard's son, who spent a long time here as a player and on the coaching staff, so I think it'd be pretty cool to bring him down to Miami. For the Orlando Magic, they're getting Malik Monk. Yes, the Magic needed scoring. They traded a bunch of picks for Desmond Bane, but they still need more. And that move for Desmond Bane, it signifies they're ready to go all in, and adding a guy like Malik Monk with his scoring prowess, that would be just a match made in heaven for Orlando. And then they're also getting Keon Ellis, who's a very good defender too. So you're basically adding one guard that could score, one that could defend, and you're adding that to a team with Desmond Bane who could score and Jalen Suggs who could defend. It's like you're adding different type of guards or depth for different style of guards. And I think the Magic would just have an insanely well-rounded roster too as they try to go all in. On the Kings, they are getting Terry Rozier's expiring contract, so that would open up a lot of money for them as they look to rebuild. And then they're getting a nice young guard in Anthony Black, who could help them during their rebuild because he's only 21 years old, and I still think he has some potential. The Magic, they can afford to lose Goga because their front court depth consists of Paolo and Franz, and they just re-signed Mo Wagner. They still have Wendell Carter. They still have Jonathan Isaac. So Goga probably wouldn't play much as is, and he's too good a player to not get minutes. That's why I think the Magic should look to move him for some value. I'm sure they wouldn't love losing Anthony Black, but he had a pretty down year last year. I still think he's a bit of a project, and the Magic are trying to go for it. So if you're going to go for it, you trade the 21-year-old Anthony Black for Malik Monk, who fits perfect. So I can see the Magic doing this, and they're only trading one first-round pick. They're not really giving up a ton here. Yeah, they're losing 3 players, but they're replacing it with Monk and Keon. Keon's a good player. The Kings, for some reason, they didn't want to play Keon Ellis. They didn't want to pay him. He's due for a contract. They didn't want to pay him. They've been looking to move Malik Monk too, so it's like the Kings really aren't giving up that much here either. They're getting a first-round pick and some expiring money and a nice young player. I think I cooked here. I really don't think anyone says no to this trade. The Magic are getting the good depth there as well. So these are just a few trades that can help the Miami Heat get a big man. Of course, free agency is still another option. The Heat have an open roster spot, but I think I'll save that topic for another video. But make sure to leave your comments down below. Let me know which one of these trades you like the best. And if there's another backup center you think could be in the trade market, let me know who you're thinking of. Maybe we'll talk about them in a future video. Make sure to like this video and subscribe because I'm on the grind to hit 9,000 subs. And I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace out, everyone.
Look, pull up in your city, tryna get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.